All right, well, welcome to Script to Screen La La Land. This is our season finale. Our sixth season is coming to an end tonight. We will be back in October, don't worry. As Patrice mentioned in the opening, we have some good things lined up already for fall. Can't announce them yet. But this is, we're very excited. We were after La La Land a long time. Our talent was not available, so we're grateful they came here. As you know, it won 6 Academy Awards, and they won a production design Oscar. It also, yeah. They also worked on some pretty other amazing movies. Kill Bill, Inglourious Bastards. One of my all-time favorites, Collateral. Have anybody seen that Tom Cruise movie? So we're going to talk a little about some of those films, but tonight we're here to start with La La Land. So please welcome to the Apollo Theater stage, David Wasco and Sandy Reynolds-Wasco. All right, so in honor of La La Land, of course, we're going to do a few musical numbers together. We're going to sing the questions.
I wish.
Do some tap dancing, but maybe we'll start easy. So let's just go back to the beginning. What was your initial reaction when you read the script?
Well, we loved it, and we loved Whiplash. And actually, I was tipped by a buddy of Damien's, another young director, that Damien had a script, and I was able to, through my agent, manage to get an interview pre anybody knowing about La La Land, and Damien hired me over coffee. It was unusual where you get offered the job right then and there.
And how about you, Sandy? What was your feeling when you first read the script? Can you enjoy the script, or do you look at it like, oh my God, I got to make this?
No, because I think everyone on the crew enjoyed it on first reading, because you saw we'd all been in the business long enough and in LA long enough that all the references were just everything we all wanted to do. 40s and 50s musicals, researching all of that, and then mixing it with the modern or present day story that Damien wanted to tell. So that was just irresistible.
Yeah, one thing I found interesting is balancing the vintage versus contemporary images in the film. So how did you work with Damien pre-production to make sure that was balanced properly?
Well, he really wanted to embrace the vernacular of how Los Angeles unfolds regarding you have all this different architecture side by side, as opposed to how Santa Barbara is, which there has a tone of architecture. LA has incongruous things next to each other, and he wanted to embrace that. And there were things that he wrote in the script specifically that he wanted to capture, like the Griffith Park Observatory, and but then there were things that kind of came about as we were location scouting. So that's kind of how you make a movie and build a movie. You have somewhat of an idea. He had quite a good idea as to what he wanted to do, but as you are scouting and looking at things and figuring things out, ideas come about, and you always keep an open mind about these new ideas coming to you, even if it's at the last minute, even if it's the day that you're shooting something, you are open to these new ideas.
And the old and new, I think because of that setting and the use of the studios themselves, we worked on the Warner lot and we worked at, you tell me what the other lots were.
Hollywood
but
Center.
that automatically brings you to a period in a way. You know, you've got all that history in those buildings. They're all from the 30s, sort of the period that these musicals were made, the 30s, 40s, 50s. And some of the magical architecture of, well, Mia's apartment was really wonderful because that turned out to be, it was a fluke. We were looking for these different types of apartments, hers being a little bit of a contrast to Sebastian's. But hers turned out to be a penthouse apartment that we found that Clark Gable lived in. So there was this odd history and ties.
And Ronald Reagan. It was
Ronald
actually
Reagan lived there too.
3 different it was supposed to be a Spanish garden court apartment, which the audience believes that, but we needed a rather large space in order to do the choreography dance, and none of the real garden court apartments had anything large enough. So we ended up finding this wonderful garden court apartment in Long Beach, but then a large enough interior ended up being this penthouse apartment in the Miracle Mile area that had the layout that allowed them to do the big dance number. And not until later did we find out that it was Ronald Reagan's first apartment when he moved to Los Angeles, and then also Clark Gable had rented there.
And that was when you read the script, because of all the dancing and the gals moving through different rooms and getting ready to go to their party. At first I couldn't believe we'd find a place. You know, that seemed like something we'd have to build. And also, I think in looking at things like, I think it is Singing in the Rain, where there's lots of dancing interior apartments with several actors, with Gene Kelly and
we did add architectural elements. We used it as a movie set, and we added walls, we added archways, we added things to romanticize it. And of course, we had her bedroom with the large poster. All those things were scripted because in the original script, she had this play that we did the full play, but it ended up getting edited down to be, you really never saw what the play was about. But it was
about Ingrid Bergman, oddly enough. It doesn't come through in the final at all.
But you mentioned that because really, I mean, the fact that she is so in love with classic Hollywood, as the design team, it must have been great when you have a script like that. You know Mia's character, so you can actually start dressing the look of the set. So was it difficult with the choreography though? Because obviously is it easier just to shoot outside?
Well,
compared to shooting in the apartment sequence?
Well, yeah, I mean, we work very closely with Mandy Moore, the choreographer, and actually her beats drove the length and the size of sets. For instance, the big epilogue where they dance in a big white area with the Watts Tower and the City Hall. All of that was measured and determined by the amount of beats that she needed to bring the actors through in Orange Grove, and all the sets were built and driven by her
and the
needs.
Music.
And the music.
Now, you mentioned the contrast of Sebastian's character, because his apartment is downtrodden opposite. What was the decision process to go with that different look for his apartment?
Because it was in the script that he was in the valley, and he would then go have coffee 5 miles from his place in the valley to the Van Beek studio. So all the locations we really anguished over, and nothing was found quickly. It was all, we looked at many different apartments for him, and actually a kind of heavyweight producer came on. There were two producers that were surrounding Damien that were kind of protecting his vision, and then there was a kind of a bigger guy producer that came in towards the end and was sort of trying to steer things to be like that apartment was sort of suggested to be a set built in a studio. We would never be able to shoot it, but Damien said, I want to shoot this on a practical location out in the valley, right where we drove, and we did that, and it worked, and I think that helped the actors also. Where he would come in and pick up his mail. We had all of that set, and it was filmed, but then it was edited down as the movie was shortened, and that environment helped Ryan, I think, more than having him go to a studio soundstage and walk into a set. I almost prefer to do practical locations and work with them and then back away from them and build things that are needed, even if it's unlimited budget, which we had no money on this movie, but even if there's a lot of money, I almost prefer to be in practical locations. But for instance, the planetarium, we had to build the planetarium because we needed to do the floating wire work, and then also the real planetarium now, although they did a wonderful restoration to the Griffith Park Observatory, and it's beautifully restored, they didn't carry that restoration into the planetarium. And Damien, one of the things that he did want architecturally was the deco quality, all the deco around Los Angeles, and he was so insistent on trying to capture that, even in some of the montage things, that he encouraged us to make the planetarium more deco than it ever was. And we had the reference pictures from Rebel Without a Cause, and we were able to kind of copy it and heighten that.
Yeah, I think with the two, Sebastian's house being sort of extremely simple, it was also initially he wanted that character to be more sort of like the French New Wave male character. So he wanted him very honest and nothing detracting from his goals. Whereas Mia's was more involved with the four girls' dreams. We could get away with the color. With the many directors and all the research we did that went, besides doing the 40s and 50s Technicolor Hollywood, we were also doing the Jacques Demy French color, and we could bring that into Mia's apartment as well. And the wonderful thing for me, looking at the Jacques Demy movies, which is Demoiselles de you'll have to remind me the names, Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Two Sisters of Rochefort. But when you look at them closely, they're dazzling with color, and the costumes are dazzling, and even the boats and the cars are interesting. But when you look closely, it's very low budget. It's a lot of paint, a lot of beautiful paint.
He did use practical locations,
which we were able to do, exactly.
That was one of the things that Damien first gave to us, was this French book about Jacques Demy. And although we really knew the Umbrellas of
Cherbourg. Yeah, the movies are great.
And we knew his movies, but then there were some other obscure movies that this director did. And just like Sandy's saying, if you look at them, they're bright primary colors, and he would work in a practical location, and he would paint a whole city street like blue, and then do his scenes in front. And Damien wanted, he was
bright
sort of,
colors, yeah.
He didn't say this is absolutely what we wanted to do, but we kind of took that key and went in that direction and worked with practical locations and painted streets and did these. We did the back lot like that. We painted all these colors that were kind of vibrant and put little mini Fiats and cars around to make it kind of humorous in the background.
So let's go back a little. The CinemaScope, shooting on film, 35mm film CinemaScope, because a lot of the movies are moving to digital. How did that affect how your prep work when you decided to go to that kind of old style 35mm CinemaScope look?
Luckily, we've done that a lot with Quentin and other.
That was film, and we had recently worked with British directors tend to try to, they like to shoot film instead of video, and we just work with Martin Madonna. So our last 3 movies were on film, and in many ways it really, it maybe alleviated some off of Sandy's shoulders, because in Collateral, which was I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the first digital movie. And a lot of weight was put onto Sandy's shoulders to light a lot of the background, because the camera department said, well, if we can capture nighttime, we don't really need lights, but we need street lights as far as the eye can see this way, and then we need to. So a lot had to be on set decorating, and set decorating had to have a whole series of trucks that carried street lights around. We didn't have to do that as much in this movie. However, we did bring the streetlights in every scene. That was one of the things that.
But color was real.
did.
So, but with the Technicolor, we were very aware of the color in every place. And it was a really big collaboration with the costume designer. And say in the apartment, we knew the dresses, well, the actresses were chosen, then their color dress was chosen, and then the thought was to do the different rooms to sort of match the dresses. So there was a red room and a green room and a yellow room and a
Damien was deeply concerned with the art direction, and he asked for a desk in the art department. We had a very production-friendly environment where we had kind of a series of warehouses in Atwater Village where all the departments, like Sandy is saying, the costume department, the camera department, were all in one area, and we're able to see what each other was doing. And Damien made a point to, in early prep, he spent great deals of time with us where he just went through everything. We went through every single scene, every page of the script, and then we would have the camera, Linus, the cameraman, and the costume designer, we would all be talking together, so everybody knew what he wanted, and we were able to, and that's not always the case. It's not always as clear. There's so many people that it takes to build a movie that often a lot is lost in just the sheer size and communication, and that's what I think our job is to try to communicate what the director wants to the costume designer, to the cameraman, and it was easier for us to do that with Damien.
So you read the opening scene in the script. Oh, dance sequence, LA freeway.
Yeah.
So did you immediately step to how are we going to do this, or did you? So what was the biggest obstacle other than shutting down Los Angeles?
Well, we actually found there were 3 options, and he chose the elevated option. There were 2 other options of legs of freeway that we were able to own and control and shut down, and we showed him all 3. And then when we showed him the connector between the 105 and the 110, he loved it. So it was less of a hassle for the art department, more of a hassle for everybody else. But what we did was we did things to help the dancers. We built things that allowed them to step over the dividers, and it was a safety thing. I mean, I hate to even be that cut and dry about it, but safety is a big thing in all movie making, low and big budget. And my thoughts were we were going to be 100 feet off the ground, and there's a low parapet wall everybody was jumping all over the place. Somebody would jump off by mistake, and nobody was hurt. But strangely, that ended up not being as complicated. What the art department did was gave them a rehearsal space in our production office area, which was just in a parking lot where we measured everything and had everything the same arc and laid out all the cars, so it allowed the dancers to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, because we only had a window we got the freeway for one day. We were able to rehearse the weekend before where we actually had the freeway, but it was very quick and had to be out of there. And the weather worked, it was clear. It was very hot, which was also dangerous, but it all worked.
It's stunning. That was the perfect example of how every department had to work together on that one. Because even just thinking about transportation, trying to get the cars up there and in place quickly enough, and then off again, for us to do the work up there. And yeah, it was amazing. And then the cranes and the camera work were pretty impressive.
It was really masterful.
And you look at all the costumes, definitely then lead to the painting and the apartments, the colors, and
exactly.
So if you were not in sync with a costume designer, that would have thrown a lot of stuff off.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked a little about the apartment, but I actually, one of my favorite musical numbers was one of the earlier ones at the pool party. Mm-hmm. Lighting, directing, the champagne, the gold, the balcony. How did you find that location, and what was your challenges for that?
It was a nightmare.
It was actually it was hard because what I was telling Matt was interesting, because we actually had found a better location because Sandy and I were prepping the movie when there was the original casting, which was Miles Teller and Emma Watson. And we were scouting with Damien, and we found an incredible house that had, the house that was used didn't have a vista view of Hollywood, a fan of lights, like the Ed Ruscha painting. And when the casting changed, we ended up having to wait almost 6 months for Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, the new actors. And Damien stuck with us, and we continued to look and work with him. It wasn't 12-hour days every day a week, but we were thinking about things. But we in that time we lost that one location. They did a video and burned the neighborhood. They did loud music, and the community didn't want to use the house. So we looked everywhere, and we couldn't find a house. All the new houses had infinity pools, and he wanted to be able to dance around the pool. So we would find the house with a view, several elements, and then it would have an infinity pool, and he couldn't dance around it. So we had finally found this house out in the western part of the valley that allowed us to do loud music at night, and the fireworks were laid in at the very end, but it had a pool house. We were able to take the railing off the pool house and have one of the people jump in, and
we found it only about, I think maybe 10 days before we shot it.
yeah,
So this was during shooting.
It was getting
And this
dangerous.
is another
yeah.
thing. This was what was really wonderful about Linus and Damien, is just their flexibility, because a lot of the locations determined the dancing, determined everything, and they had to. So, they were rehearsing there at night. It's not necessarily rehearsing, but Mandy would have to go there at night with Damien after they're shooting their regular days and go through the choreography and the camera work. It was intense.
We painted. We added decking around the pool that allowed the actors to dance around the pool, and of course all the decoration. Sandy's work was brought in. We did have things that were not seen. There was a Saturday Night Fever kind of a light up checkerboard dance floor that you never saw, and things that when the movie is cut, those go by the wayside. As was the freeway scene. Was not in the first cut. It was omitted, and then it came back, which I thought, because once we make the movie, we're not involved anymore once the movie is edited, and I was surprised to hear that hard to pull off scene didn't make the final cut, and then it came back in the cut that.
Okay, so obviously the scene that I noticed the audience was getting very excited about was the tap dance scene.
Yeah, people think that was a lot of my co-workers that are good designers, and they think it's a set with a translight, and it was a view into Burbank in Griffith Park, where they walk up. We brought the street lights, and again, it was one of these hard to find locations, but when we found it, we were able to rehearse there, and it was shot just in that little window of time that when you have sunset, the magic hour, that allowed him to capture it, and it was a complicated crane shot.
But you didn't have a hard time finding it. You just found it was okay.
It was hard to find.
Yeah, I had a really great scout that I've used on a bunch of different movies that is kind of a secret weapon that can find these odd places, and that has helped me on a few different movies.
I think, again, Damien would have loved, as in the producer's party house, that view of lights going out, like in the Ed Ruscha paintings. But it got that sort of sunset magic hour that he loved too, which is that sort of nighttime rainbow of pink and blue, and it was really beautiful.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments, and I'm sorry, as someone who runs a movie theater, is the Rialto scene.
Yeah.
I love the Rialto.
How was it, like, resurrecting the old single house?
Well, it was,
you know,
again, It was an homage to The Player, which they showed the bicycle thief when they shot a scene there in that. And it's closed, and it's one of these other things that is sort of destined to be demolished because it's almost getting dangerous now. But we looked at a bunch of different theaters, including the Vista, which was in our neighborhood. We live in Los Feliz, and the Vista is a little kind of clean and new. And when we looked at the Rialto, it was really funky and threadbare. Is perfect for what he wrote. He didn't pick. That was not in the script. So that was chosen, and we basically got it back up and running, and it was wonderful. And one of the things that I think is great that we're able to do with film is the Rialto isn't going to be there forever, and it now will be there. It's like it's one of the nice things that film can do is capture a moment in time in a city, which we were able to do with this movie, as I think we did with Royal Tannenbaums in New York. We caught a time in New York that was kind of magical, and it's like Double Indemnity. If you look at the movie, they shot it all around. They just went around and they shot, in grocery stores and things like that, and you can really sort of see what everything looked like in LA at the time. So we were able to do that with this movie.
Yeah, I know it was a bummer that they broke up, but I was more sad when Mia drove by the clothesline.
I know.
That's the hardest scene.
Yeah.
It wasn't for you. All right. One thing, we actually talked to Damien at the Writers Guild, and he was very worried about reality transforming into the fantasy. So how do you handle that? Like, let's take the Griffith Observatory, because you have to segue from the real scene to this fantastical scene.
I think he was concerned about that, but then he basically kind of embraced the reality of what LA looks like now, and didn't really want to do anything different, like choose a different film stock or do. So I don't know if you want to expand.
We never really, I'm just thinking, we never really mapped it out scene by scene that way. I mean, the opening scenes, the studio has a little of both just because of it's the nature of the animal. Mia's sort of does as well. Then we can go to reality with Sebastian's apartment, and his world is all very grounded. The studios and all of that, and then that sort of darker section where she's in Arizona back with her family is very grounded in reality. So I think it's just a matter of the sort of wave or threading throughout the whole thing that kind of allows that to happen. And then also when they're breaking into song, it just automatically lets you be fantastic.
So let's talk about the other character, Los Angeles. That's normally movies they're almost equal. In fact, I think they dominate the scene sometimes, especially towards the end.
We love LA. We love it, and we're so honored to have been invited to capture it again. And we had the opportunity to do it, with Reservoir Dogs, with Pulp Fiction, with Collateral, with Seven Psychopaths, with Paul Schrader's Touch. And we did this was number 11 on movies about LA, and it's a fantastic city, and it's ever changing. And that's what I was saying before, is that there are these things that are just evaporating. They're being torn down and gone, and it was this little window of time to, like, oh goody, we're going to be able to capture the city again and try to get all these great things before they're gone. And it was a wonderful thing for us.
And it was scripted. Damien really wanted to capture certain things about LA, whether it was bougainvillea against a purple walled building, or the sunsets, or the mixture of sort of decrepit and then modern, Geary-ish. We didn't show Geary, but it could have been.
Murals was a big
this
thing.
Convoluted. But I think Damien, I'm not sure exactly where he grew up, but I get the feeling that his time in Boston and his time in LA were just as sort of interesting to him. And I think to everybody, sort of the first cities they go to when they're finding those, when they're going for their dreams, have that magical aspect to it. And I think maybe Manhattan and Paris and LA are particularly romantic, but I think I think that was the thing to make LA this sort of.
So with you two in love with LA, the love montage must have been the funnest kind of.
Well, it was. I mean, it just. It was.
Yeah, that was great, and a
it
lot of that was
great.
done in one house.
Yeah, and yeah, we did find again a lot of what drives what we do is the practicality of trying to be frugal and efficient with being able to do multiple things in one location, or and we did the interior of the Chateau Marmont and a lot of that montage in one little historic park in Canoga Park that had a couple of historic buildings, and it functioned as a variety of things. But we still, even though we were out of practical location, a good deal of the murals were made for the movie, and then we also were able to use existing old murals, like the mural of actors that she walks in front of, is a historic mural. But we did create a lot of our own things, and also in that montage, we had a matte glass painter. One of the things that Damien wanted us to do, he didn't want any CGI or computer-driven effects. He wanted everything to be very low-tech and old-fashioned, but he wanted matte glass painting, which is exactly what it says. It's a painting on a piece of glass that's in front of the camera, and you kind of can create something. So the whole Paris, pan over Paris to the Club Hachette was a matte glass painter, and we found that craft is sort of not used anymore. And I managed to find one guy that actually worked on the original Mary Poppins, Rocco Joffrey, and he did several matte glass paintings for us, including that big Paris painting. And he also worked on one of the other movies that I thought this movie was influenced by, and that's the little scene Francis Coppola's One from the Heart, which was a musical that bankrupted Zoetrope Studios, but it was shot.
It was great.
It was shot at Zoetrope Studios, which was the one studio that we used for the Warner Brothers Studios. It was we used Warner Backlot and then also Hollywood Center Studios, which is the old Zoetrope Studios. So I was able to work on the lot that was the place where my mentor did One from the Heart. And so.
I was curious about Sebastian selling out.
Pardon?
When Sebastian starts selling out his music and the big concert, how was that kind of going? You had this whole great vintage look. Now suddenly you got to create a look of that surreal.
There are two scenes not seen in the movie, and he gradually, they start out more jazzy in a little club, and then there's a progression. Then all of a sudden there's this big show with the girls dancing.
There were other clubs that we did this arc of him, and they were shot, but they just jumped right to this.
Which makes sense.
Big
it's
thing.
better script.
And it was fine. And
I believe that he would do that after listening to Mia talk to her mom.
Definitely,
yeah.
But he mentioned the arc, because I also like the arc of all the audition scenes with Mia, how their sets got more and more constricting and horrible, but the last one was warm and inviting. Yeah. Was that something you were conscious of? We had to change?
He did, yeah, and Damien might have even talked about this, but he did a line drawing for us when we first started to talk that had a progression, and it had these peaks and valleys, where the movie went to a height and then went down and then went up again and then went down and then went up again. And that's how we did the sets to be claustrophobic and then opened them up and then so he really had this whole thing in his mind. And again, the script was written prior to Whiplash, so he had it for a long time, and he just kind of waited until he had the budget, even though this was frugal in comparison to most other Hollywood things. He had this in his mind, and he was able to convey that to us and the other department heads that helped give this, create what we are looking at.
Well, you mentioned you had more time because Miles telling the actor swap. In some ways, it might have been better for Damien to have these extra time.
Yeah.
Just to let it sit and permeate.
Yeah, everything now, just the climate with what we're experiencing is that everything is driven by budget and money, and the prep time is being reduced and reduced and reduced. So we're forced to try to figure things out as quickly as possible. So often what we do is we, even before if we're offered the job, but we're not actually paid to be doing this, we will meet with the director and we'll try to figure things out to just give us that amount of prep time that is proper for what you really want to do. A lot of people don't understand. You look at everything and you think, okay, well, they went into that apartment, but it is so much effort goes into figuring out, and you want to protect the director. You want to let the director be happy with what he has to do. I mean, that's what our job is to help him tell the story and to help the actors do their job. And if the actors are unhappy with something, it's our job to kind of try to cater to that. Make sure, and like you and I were talking, even something as simple as the car that Ryan drove, he actually picked that himself. I'm a car guy, and I like to really be very specific about the type of car an actor is driving, because it's almost like the type of suit or costume that they're given. And I was showing him all these different things, and he had the idea to use the mid-'80s Riviera, and I thought, that's a great car. Perfect. so we cater to that.
So Sebastian's Club. So how was that? What was the process? Did you find the club?
Again,
How much did you dress
hard
it?
To find, where we you look, you draw a circle around LA, and you look at everything in LA, and then the circle gets bigger, and we ended up in Long Beach again, which is kind of the way, it's kind of an ungentrified part of LA that you can find things, because everything now is changed and updated and gentrified, and we're able to find some pretty cool clubs and things that you actually go walk down to a basement. But we did a lot to it. It was a bar, and we made it into that club. The exterior, of course, was on Santa Monica Boulevard, which there was a finale scene where they are supposed to drive away into the sunset that we shot, and the exterior of the club was picked for that, and it ended up not being used in the movie.
Yeah, the club that we did use, we kind of ended up there a little bit because it was near Mia's exterior apartment, so they were sort of, that's why we ended up in Long Beach, but it was good. What we ended up, it was a restaurant, so there were lots of bolted down tables inside and another, so we took all those things out and their existing stage, and then they had murals all over the walls that we covered with a fabric, which you may notice next time you see it, you can kind of see it a little. But so we did all that, and then added the lighting and of course the jazz ephemera.
Yeah, I highly recommend go to the Lionsgate website, because the screenplay is actually on the Lionsgate La La Land. So please, I would check it when you go and read it, because to me it must have been a dream for you too. The last 7 pages, because it's all to me it's all production design.
Yeah.
It was written, but it was complicated, and Damien again had it in his mind, and we did models. We did models of the big stage, and then we did rehearsal, but it took this kind of, the montage had to be added to that epilogue dance scene, and it was rather complicated.
That again was pressed for time as well, like the producer's house, because they weren't locking down studio spaces, and they didn't want to spend money on a big studio. So finally they got it. Finally we got in there, but there wasn't enough time to do large drops. So they were sketched and hand painted and watercolored and then blown up.
All of the backdrops, everything was all painted. I have an art director, artist friend who's also a production designer that worked with me on and Sandy on Royal Tannenbaums, but Carl Sprague is a concept illustrator, and he's actually a very good watercolor painter, and he can do these very loose, and he did what is called mood sketches that are quite beautiful, and then those were tightened up, and then so they started as his paintings, which were physically paintings, and then they were given to a digital artist who then painted on top of his paintings and kind of heightened them because, you know, we were referencing Raoul Dufay, the painter, and a few other painters that we, you know, were copying the style.
Were they blown up from the digital size?
Yeah, to massive. I mean, they were 100 some odd feet long, you know, some of the.
And then again touched a little bit by hand painting.
Yeah,
over
and then
them.
the
But it was
lighting
a
department
much more-
would
it was a
light
quick
would light
process.
would light them. But then in front of the big painted backdrops, we built the little flat gas station, and then all of the cutouts of the Orange Grove. All of those were like little theater pieces that they can move around, and that's the other thing is that I like to give the set to the shooting unit, and then let them, they can sort of move it around a little bit and play with it and make it, and even up to the last minute, Linus and Damien needed more of the Orange Grove. They needed more time to go through that, even though we measured everything out. So everything is sort of, as I said, left open, and you know, we cater to the needs right up into the very, very last minute.
We always end our show on the same question. So can you tell us about a movie theater experience you had, or a movie that perhaps inspired you? A childhood movie theater experience, a movie you saw long ago that it maybe inspired you to go into this field?
I know for me it was the early Cinerama stuff was pretty strong and powerful. But you know, I still, my mentor designer Dean Tavaleris did the early Coppola stuff, like the Godfather things, and then I still think Apocalypse Now is amazing.
Oh, you always loved Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia is great. Actually,
That was always you.
the Fellini stuff, and then also Stanley Kubrick stuff. Because I was in high school and watching 2001, and those were things that were outstanding to me.
How about you, Sandy? What was something that?
I think for decorating, it was probably Dr. Zhivago. That's not one of my top. It would be my top 10 or 20 maybe, but for decorating, it's fabulous. It's just beautiful. That ice house is just
But
perfect.
you liked Bonnie and Clyde also, which
Yeah, but
is
it's not really a. I wouldn't say that's what made me want to do movies. Although I love.
But
that.
you love the movie.
I love the movie. Yeah.
Well, as mentioned, this is our 6th season finale. So I'm excited. And as part of, we talked about a lot of teamwork, how it is a team. We're losing actually a lot of our team members, Script to Screen team members, are moving off to graduating. Celino Del Toro's behind camera, has been my camera person for 2 years. Jessica Loy has been producing these shows and trying to wrangle me for years. Alex DeSanto, who actually was the La La Land main producer tonight because it's her favorite movie. Stephanie Shee, who's hiding behind the camera, and she's going to be embarrassed. And finally, Andre Wood is directing tonight, and this is our final directorial because they're all graduating. So I do want to thank you all for making this show possible. And I want to thank you two for coming and sharing this wonderful film with our audience.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.